Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Teen Talk Central. In this week's episode, we're talking all about saying no with kindness and how to reject people without feeling super guilty about it, because I feel like that's something that a lot of people can experience. And if that's something that you're interested or want to learn more about, then definitely continue listening to this week's episode of Teen Talk Central. Hey guys, it's Mia, and let's jump right into this episode. This is definitely a different episode. I feel like I want to try to start to branch out a little bit from the types of episodes that we're doing, and this week I thought we would talk about basically how to say no and reject people. I think a lot of people can experience certain things where you are getting a text from someone asking to hang out or collaborate or just talk, and you just feel this wave of hesitation. I think there's potentially a thought spiral that's like, oh my god, if I say no, what if they think I'm rude? Or they're going to stop liking me, they're going to start spreading rumors that I'm a fake person, all that stuff. And I think that there's a difference between flat out saying no and then kind of saying no with a reason or a purpose. And today we're going to be learning how to say no with kindness. And it's honestly one of the hardest things to learn and do. But it's also the most freeing thing. And it's one of the most, freeing emotional skills that we can learn as teenagers before we go into adulthood. So before we start, I just want you guys to think, how often do you say yes when you don't actually mean it? And what does it cost you emotionally? I feel like a lot of times we just say yes to do stuff or not let people down. But then in the long run, how does it affect you? Do you dread the day that it's coming to do something or hang out with someone, yada yada? And obviously you don't like that feeling of dread. And that feeling of dread is essentially what we're trying to avoid in this episode. And I'm trying to teach you guys how to basically live a life without any of this dreading or kind of hesitation when it comes to making plans or just in general. It's a general concept that you can probably use throughout your whole life. So I want to first get into why saying no actually feels pretty hard. I think a lot of people in general think that the word no is a pretty negative word and there's a negative connotation put to it. But as always, let's go into the psychology behind it. The first topic I want to talk about is social conditioning. Teenagers are usually taught that being nice means actually never disappointing anyone. And I feel like that's a rule that's been pretty well ingrained in at least my head. So I'm assuming a lot of people's heads from a pretty young age. I think that we've always learned that you should never disappoint people. Disappointment's probably one of the worst things that you can do to people. And to always just kind of be open and down to do anything. Because I would rather kind of have this dreading feeling than disappoint someone, because disappointing people is I think a lot of people think such a negative thing and they don't want to be seen in a negative light. The next one is obviously the fear of rejection. I think we avoid saying no because we want to stay liked, or I feel like in high school it's staying relevant. And we always want to be included in stuff and we want to avoid tension. So we think that the best way to avoid tension is by never disappointing people. You see how everything's kind of linking together? And the last one is just the people-pleasing cycle. I think the temporary relief of they're happy with me versus the long-term resentment or burnout is also something that a lot of teenagers think about. They think, okay, as long as they're satisfied with what I did and they're happy with me, why does it matter, even if I had a little hesitation? Versus there's this kind of resentment of what if I hung out with them? And this is all basically just a cycle, and it's kind of a never-ending cycle, and that is because we want to say yes to everything, and that's because we don't want to disappoint anyone. So everything basically kind of loops around. So it's social conditioning, fear of rejection, people-pleasing cycle, and then it goes back to social conditioning. And this is the cycle that we're trying to break. And also, there's this kind of idea that the people with higher sensitivity of rejection perceive even mild disapproval as super painful. So if you are a lot more sensitive when someone says no, then you're kind of a bit more, you perceive disapproval as something that's a bit more hard on you, and you feel like it might be a little bit more personal. And over time, if we constantly say yes, it kind of becomes automatic. And even when it goes against what we need, our first thought is to say yes, not think about it and kind of choose between yes, no, maybe so. So the idea is that every time you basically say yes to something that you don't want, you're saying no to something you do want. Do you get what I'm saying? Because if you say yes to hanging out with someone that you don't want to do, you're basically saying no to, like, for example, alone time or scrolling on TikTok or something like that. So that's something that I kind of want people to keep in mind as we kind of go through this episode and just, like, as you go on through your daily life. So I feel like we need to talk about this because there's a difference between just being kind to someone and then being a doormat for someone. I personally think that true kindness and respect is respecting both your boundaries and theirs. So that's why you kind of have to, like, get to know a person a little bit more to understand what their boundaries are and for them to understand what your boundaries are. I think because without that, you can't really treat each other with kindness because you both don't know what you're expecting out of it. And I think being overly accommodating, so being like, oh, I'm always down to do whatever you want. Oh, I'll drive, I'll pay, whatever. That often hides a fear of conflict and you're not being genuine. I think personally, the best friendships come with a little bit of conflict, a little bit of spice to it, you know? Because if you never, ever, ever fight with your friends and you say, I've never fought with my best friend of yada yada, that's either you have the world's most amazing relationship, which lucky for you, or you're actually real, genuine people to each other. Because if you don't, like, argue a little bit, that means you're not, like, trying to help each other become better people. And one person might just be overly nice to the other and overly accommodating, which we don't really love. Because you're not being yourself with them. I think you have to be your true self to people all the time. And then also, it's not really about making everyone comfortable, it's about being honest. So just because, well, I'm not saying, like, be bluntly honest all the time and, like, hurt people's feelings and make them cry. No, don't get that twisted. But I'm saying in general, you should try to be honest with people instead of basically lying and, like, trying to, like, make everyone feel like, oh, one whole happy group. No, if you're not honest with people, it can honestly make it a little bit more awkward because maybe everyone else sees it as one way. But if you're so persistent on, like, trying to make everyone comfortable, it can sometimes be a little bit of an awkward situation. And you have to be nice without also being mean, you know? So there's this hard line that we have to kind of figure out. And I think the next thing I want to talk about is just, like, I would say a pretty good framework on how to reject someone without feeling guilty. I'm not saying this works every time, and I'm not saying this exact structure, but take this with what you will, and this is at least what I've kind of learned, or the process that I've personally done in my life. So the first one is to acknowledge the request and be like, oh, thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate you thinking of me, or, like, I really appreciate that you're asking me to do this, or whatever. Kind of something along the lines of acknowledging the request. And then you have to state your truth. Because if you don't state your truth, even if you lie, you're basically just back in this cycle. You say, for example, you could say, but I don't have the energy for that right now. And it's a kinder way of just saying, no, I don't want to. Because if you say that, it could be blunt, and again, that could be a really bad thing. And then you can end with warmth or kind of a closing sentence if you want. And, you know, you can say maybe another time though. And just keep it short, concise, simple. Obviously you can change around this framework if you want, but this is kind of what I've done. So let me give you guys, like, an example scenario in case, you know, you need to figure it out. So if your friend's like, hey, like, want to go study together on Monday after school. And you're like, you know, like, thank you so much, like, I really would, but I have a doctor's appointment, or, but I really, like, I just need to study alone, and I prefer studying alone, but maybe another time we can go hang out, something like that. Just keep it simple, and I think that it's trying to break the autonomy of your vocabulary, and trying to sit and think a little bit more, and by saying no, you're reinforcing this, like, autonomy, which boosts your confidence and in the long term definitely reduces anxiety. So I feel like the last part that I want to talk about is just handling the aftermath. Sometimes the guilt will hit you, and it's like kind of that feeling that you're like, oh my God, I'm so mean, after saying no, and it's emotionally conditioning and it's not reality. I think you need to learn to sit with the guilt instead of fixing it by over-explaining. And I personally don't think that you owe anyone else an explanation. Like, if you gave your reason in that statement, that's it. The guilt should kind of be over. But if you feel that you feel a little bit guilty still, you can use affirmations like my needs matter too. I think that's something that a lot of people forget. I think a lot of people are people pleasers and they just want to do everything to help make other people feel good. But you also have to make yourself feel good in order for everyone else around you to feel good. And also, you have to remember that respectful honesty builds stronger connections in the long run. Trust me, I've learned this. It's better to be honest and then build a stronger foundation than to be a liar and build a shaky foundation. So, another situation you could be in is from the other side, right? You're flipping the script. What happens when you're rejected? You learn from the other side. So rejection doesn't quite mean that you're disliked. It's often that they might have certain boundaries and timing or capacity. Don't automatically think that they hate you. I think that's something a lot of people experience. They think, oh my gosh, she said no, she hates me. No. Listen to her reason. If she doesn't give you a reason, don't overthink it. Maybe she's just busy that one time. Maybe they're not as, good at explaining their emotions as you are because you listened to this episode. So maybe you should send it to them and be like, hey, I listened to this episode and I really thought it was helpful. I thought you should listen to, I learned how to express my emotions better. Something like that, but don't make it too passive aggressive. And also, you have to normalize hearing no without spiraling. I think it helps us understand how to give it to. I think if you hear no in the right context, in the long run, it can really help you say no. So, a little quote I want to give out is that rejection isn't the end of a connection. It's a moment of honesty. And I think that's really important for people to understand, especially in this day and age. I feel like no's are taken in such a negative way, and I kind of want to reduce the stigma of that. So, I think revisiting the main message of this overall episode is just kindness and honesty aren't opposites. They're literally partners, and without them, I don't think you can build a true connection. So, I have a little challenge for you guys. Practice one kind of rejection this week and notice how you feel afterwards. Do you feel a little bit guilty or do you feel relieved and freeing, and do you not have that dreading feeling? I think this is something that's really important because, again, in the long run, it's going to really help your mental health and anxiety because you're not going to be dreading anything. So I think one closing statement I would like to tell you guys is that protecting your peace is not rude. It's literally responsible because you're trying to be basically like the owner of your own mental health, which is so important nowadays because I think that mental health can always be kind of left in the back burner because we're always prioritizing other people. So I just want everyone to prioritize themselves this week and, in the long run. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Teen Talk Central. I know it was a little bit of a longer one and a little bit of a chatty one, but I feel really passionate about this topic. So if you guys have any questions or anything, let me know down below in the Spotify description or YouTube, wherever you're listening to this podcast. And yeah, I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!